So guys, this is where we left off yesterday. Sorry, yesterday for you is a different day for me. So this is Thursday's lecture. Yesterday was Tuesday. I'm actually doing this on Wednesday night. I'm usually doing it the night before so that everything's ready and set to go for you guys in the following day. So we left off on our lecture notes with Puritanism. We were talking about each person being responsible for his or her own salvation through self-reliance, industriousness, and the other concepts here that we are continuing at the top. Okay, we had temperance. Okay, and temperance was the act of not indulging in any substances that alter the state of mind. So you could really think about this. The major thing that they would be talking about here is alcohol. So they would have a no alcohol in their society. Also, they would probably be against smoking of tobacco or any other type of substance that would alter your state of mind. The other was simplicity. Simplicity would be something in terms of everything in moderation. Now, this meant from their clothes to their homes, to their speech, to their hairstyle, everything, okay? Even emotions were not to be too much, too extreme, either too high or too low, okay? So if we're talking about simplicity in terms of clothes, these would be natural colors or muted tones. You would not see anything in terms of like a really bright, dark red. You might see a pale maroon or a pale purple, but nothing overly bright. The colors that were typically sought after were black, white, brown. Okay, other colors were seen, but they were often more muted. When we watch the movie The Crucible, you're going to see the young girls having some muted colors, such as a muted pink and a muted purple and a muted blue, but nothing is going to be a bright color. There wouldn't be any bright reds. There would be no bows in girls' hairs. Everything was not to be drawn. There was not supposed to draw any special attention to yourself. Now, going on to what their belief system was. Puritan beliefs: every human being is by nature is corrupt and perverted as a result of Adam and Eve's fall. Okay, so this would be tied to, okay, Puritans are tied to Christianity. And this concept of Adam and Eve is the story of the creation story and the creation of man as told by the Christian Bible. So in the story, Adam and Eve were created, and Eve was tempted by the serpent to eat from the tree of knowledge, which was one thing she was never to do. She convinced Adam to eat from the tree as well. And so this was the reason, this was the first sin. Okay, the first sin was the eating of the apple. And this is also sometimes in many cultures and many religions why, especially within Christianity and those that tie to Christianity, why women are often seen as the lesser. They're believed as the ones that seduced Adam to do something wrong. So, continuing with B, nothing was to be done to an extreme. I remember how I said before, everything was done in moderation. Their covenant, okay, and this was known as like their pact, their agreement with God, enjoined them to create a society governed by the Bible, and this is a reference to the Christian Bible, in which everyone worked for the common good. Now, the reason why I wanted to use the word covenant is because you're going to hear in the crucible, you're going to hear the word covenanted women and men. I am a covenanted woman, okay? I have made a pact with God himself and I would not break it. It literally demanded strict conformity, which conformity meaning you must obey. Dissenters, people that did not agree or who went against. Dissenters were often flogged. Okay, flogging is the act of public whipping. Okay, now that's a big part of the concept, is it had to be a public act of humiliation. So everyone could be taught a lesson by what somebody else did. They could be banished or on occasion put to death. Or perhaps accused of witchcraft. Puritan society was very strict, not even allowing for any mistakes to be made. By anyone, even children. Children were not exempt from this. This was during the society that it was children were meant to be seen, not heard. Everything done wrong was a sin and must be punished. Something as simple as sleeping in church. Now, the thing about sleeping in church, it seems like, oh, that would be, in our modern era, most of the time church services last only an hour to 2 hours at most. However, in Puritan society, church would be held in the meeting hall. Okay? And so everyone would go to the meeting hall. But the thing about it is you would wake up, okay, at dawn, you would eat a cold breakfast because you were not allowed to do any work. So you might have bread and butter, but the bread is from the day before. All of the cooking had to be done the day before. You could not even cook on that day. Okay, so they'd eat a cold breakfast and then they would go to meeting, okay, which would be their church service. And they would go to the meeting, okay, from, let's say, 7 a.m., okay? And they would go there and they'd be in it until lunch. They would release for lunch, and then they'd go back for afternoon meeting, okay? And that would be approximately, we'll say, 1 p.m., and then they would go until dinner, Okay? And then they would be released to go home for dinner. And then it would probably be about that time that after dinner would be bedtime. So we're talking about, instead of just an hour or two, we're looking at a whole day spent in a church service. Okay, so we'll say five hours here and maybe another 5 hours here. So you're talking 8 to 10 hours in a meeting. But if you were not paying attention or goofing around, even as a child, this was seen as a sin and something that was highly punished. Emotions were to be repressed. If they were not, this was considered another sin. You were not to cry. Okay? You were not to raise your voice or yell. You were not to be overly happy or laugh loudly. Everything was done in moderation. Those who followed Satan, another word for Satan would be the devil, were witches. Those who sinned were said to follow Satan. So if you did something wrong, oftentimes a child might even say that I was tempted to do it, that Satan made me do it. It's always easier to blame someone else for our own mistakes. All right, continuing. Women, children, and the insane were the weakest. And were said to carry out Satan's work. Social outcasts, or those seen as different, were often accused of witchcraft. Now, this could be something as simple as you didn't conform exactly to what they expected at that time. If you had bright red hair, something that drew attention to you, that was to be covered at all costs, and you were not supposed to draw attention to yourself. Brown hair, brown eyes was seen as the best. Someone who was extremely pretty, you're trying to draw attention to yourself, and that was seen as a reason for being a social outcast. If you thought differently, if you acted differently, if you had intense emotions, any of these things were seen as a reason to be a social outcast, and oftentimes would have women become accused of witchcraft, such as everyone lived within the city limits. If you were a hermit or somebody who liked to live on their own and not be around other people, nobody would understand this, and they would be a social outcast, and then more likely to become accused of witchcraft. Someone who did not attend church services would be seen as a social outcast. Someone who lost their family fortune and was relying on the charity of others, social outcast. These were all sad things, but these were ways that the Puritans dealt with any type of social outcast. Now, sadly enough, we see this still happening today in many cases, where individuals who do not conform to what is seen as society standards are then vilified, made to be villains, even if there is nothing wrong. We've seen this in the form of the course of time. Who have we vilified to make them seem worse than they are. During the Holocaust, it was the Jews and people that were homosexuals, individuals we now see as parts of the LGBTQIA community, are still often seen as individuals who must be evil or wrong because they do not conform to what many believe to be the social standards of the day. Individuals who are of different religion, of different race, sometimes those individuals are marginalized because of these things. It doesn't make it right. It just is something, yes, that has always happened, but it should be something that then we fight against. We are going to stop with this because there is a video that I do want you to watch. And I want you to be able to do some comparison.